The Hall of Convergence had been carved out of a drifting world fragment, a hollowed moon whose jagged exterior still bore the scars of an ancient collision. Within its cavernous interior, light from captured stars refracted through crystalline prisms, casting shifting patterns across the domed ceiling. Delegates from 1,000 civilizations filled the tiers of stone, metal, or biogrown thrones that encircled the central floor. It was said that the Hall of Convergence was the most important space in the galaxy, the place where law was spoken into permanence and war was dissolved before its first blood was spilled. Yet to Ambassador Sira Kalen of Earth, seated at her assigned alcove along the lowest ring, it felt less like a temple of wisdom and more like a theater. Every gesture was performance. Every silence was calculated. Above her, vast figures loomed, the scaled diplomats of the Qatari Dominion, their eyes like molten coins, the living flame forms of the ascended flares, flickering with colors that shifted according to meaning, the chittering chorus of the multithron clans, dozens of bodies sharing a single speaking role. There were beings whose voices resonated directly in the mind, and others whose words were filtered through symbiotic translators that grew from their flesh. All had gathered for a single matter, the rising reports from the frontier, where colonies whispered of incursions by a force that consumed not land, but life itself. Sira adjusted the folds of her dark formal robes. She knew her role before she ever stepped into the hall. Humanity was here to advise, but never to decide. It was the same role her predecessors had been condemned to for generations. Humanity's history, the endless wars of unification, the nuclear brinkmanship, the interplanetary conflicts, had left them branded as a reckless, war-thirsty species. That humanity had survived those wars, grown stronger through them, and learned harsh lessons mattered little. To the Council, humans were soldiers who had somehow learned to speak. Nothing more. At the hall's center, the high chair of the Council rose. The being's body resembled a spider wrought of glass and ivory, 8 legs curling beneath a translucent torso through which organs pulsed faintly. Its voice carried through the air as a tremor, translated seamlessly into every ear, every mind. Delegates of the Council, the matter placed before us concerns the disturbances along the outer spiral. Colonies belonging to the Ferran League and the Jandari Accord have ceased transmission. Vessels sent to investigate have not returned. Survivors speak of devouring fleets that do not bargain, do not speak, do not retreat. The question before us, how shall the Council respond? The chamber erupted in overlapping voices, translated into a chorus of tones and languages. Some called for embargoes, others for sanctions, and still others dismissed the reports as colonial exaggerations. Sira remained silent until the chair's gesture brought order. Delegates were recognized one by one. The Qatari representative, scales glimmering like oiled bronze, unfurled its wings halfway in a gesture of authority. The Council must first discern whether these reports describe a true existential threat or merely border skirmishes magnified by fear. The Qatari Dominion advises caution. A premature mobilization would be wasteful. The flame being of the ascended flares pulsed in orange tones, indicating disdain. Caution or cowardice, whole sectors are falling silent. To debate their existence while the void fills with corpses is folly. We must contain this infestation. Contain, always contain. Sira bit back the urge to scoff aloud. She had read every military report that filtered through back channels. She had seen the grainy images of worlds stripped bare, orbiting carcasses of ships gnawed hollow. Containment was a word for delaying the inevitable. At last, the chair turned toward the lowest ring. Human delegate, you have sought recognition, speak. The hall shifted in mood, some subtle, some overt. A few delegates leaned forward, curious for spectacle. Others looked away, already dismissing her before she opened her mouth. Humanity's interventions were infamous for their violence, their calls to arms, their raw pragmatism that reeked of desperation to the more ancient powers. Sira stood, Her voice was calm, but carried weight, each word deliberate. The reports from the frontier are consistent. Civilizations are not merely falling silent, they are being erased. What you face is not an enemy that can be negotiated with. It is not an empire seeking tribute, nor a raiding horde seeking plunder. It is a hunger. It multiplies by what it devours. It will not be swayed by diplomacy. It will not be slowed by embargoes. If you wait for confirmation, confirmation will come in the silence of your own colonies. The hall muttered. Voices overlapped in tones of irritation, incredulity, even laughter. She pressed on. I urge this council, do not squander time in half measures. Mobilize now, not to contain, not to delay, to annihilate. Strike at the swarm before it festers. Strike before its roots reach your heart worlds. The laughter was not hidden now. The insectoid multithron chorus buzzed in derision. Humans speak always of annihilation, always of fire, always of war. What else do they know? The Qatari spread their wings fully, a sign of dominance. Your solution is always the sword, Terran. Perhaps it is your nature. But the Council is not a battleground for your instincts. We are civilized. We will exhaust every path of reason before we debase ourselves with your primitive reflexes. Sierra's jaw tightened. She had prepared for mockery, but the sheer arrogance was suffocating. Still, she met their contempt with composure. Civilization means nothing to a hunger that cannot recognize it. You mistake restraint for strength. In this case, restraint will be your undoing. The chair's crystal body shifted, refracting the light. Your council is noted, ambassador of Earth. It will be considered alongside the other perspectives. Which meant discarded. Sierra bowed, as protocol demanded, though the motion nearly choked her. She sat, her heart pounding with futile anger as the debate continued above her. Words like embargo, sanctions, monitoring were repeated as though they were shields. The council clung to them as children clutching charms against the dark. At last, a vote was called. The result was as inevitable as the sunrise on Earth. By overwhelming majority, the council resolved to impose strategic observation and localized quarantines in the frontier sectors while dispatching additional envoys to seek dialogue with the so-called swarm. When the decision was announced, Sierra did not rise. She remained seated, staring into the glimmering patterns on the hall's ceiling. She thought of the reports piling in on her private channels, of the images of skeletal cities, of entire oceans boiling with organic growth. She thought of how easily it could spread, system by system, until Sol itself lay beneath the shadow. The Council had dismissed humanity once again, and in doing so, it had condemned the galaxy. Sierra whispered to herself, words no translation matrix would carry, you will come crawling to us, and when you do, may we still have the strength to save you. The signal came as a fractured whisper, barely more than static carried on a dying wave. Sierra Kalen stood in the Earth delegation's quarters, a chamber that seemed small compared to the cavernous alcoves of wealthier species. A single projection screen filled the wall, alive with grainy images captured before the transmission collapsed. The symbols scrolling along the bottom belonged to the Ferran League, a species whose crystal spires once glittered along the equatorial belts of their homeworld. The images showed only ruin. Cities once radiant with refracted sunlight had been blackened, their spires toppled into jagged shards. Oceans boiled with a foaming growth that pulsed like diseased flesh. Above the surface, skies writhed with shadows that blotted out the stars, shapes too massive and too numerous for the transmission to clarify. Then, the sound. Not speech, not even noise, but a layered droning, low, resonant, inhuman, the sound of hunger given voice. Then silence. Sierra stood unmoving as the projection flickered away. Her aide, young and newly arrived from Earth, broke the quiet. Do you think the Council will accept this? Sierra exhaled slowly. They will call it inconclusive. They will say the evidence was corrupted. They will say the League embellished the threat to solicit assistance. The aide's hands clenched, but they can see what we just saw. Yes, Sierra said, but seeing is not the same as believing, not when belief requires admitting humanity was right. A chime at the door interrupted them, the signal of summoning. The council had convened in emergency session. The hall of convergence thrummed with voices raised higher than before, fear mingling with arrogance. The crystalline chair struck its limbs against the floor, summoning order, though it came slowly, reluctantly, like embers refusing to die. The Ferran League's outer colonies have fallen silent, the chair announced. We have recovered fragmentary transmissions that suggest hostile engagement. The council is called upon to determine the scope of response. The Qatari Dominion delegate spread its wings, the light-catching scales that shimmered with self-assured disdain. These are regrettable losses, but losses upon the frontier are hardly uncommon. Space is vast. Piracy, civil unrest, resource scarcity, all may appear catastrophic when viewed through a narrow lens. To declare a galaxy-wide mobilization based on shadows and whispers would be irresponsible. The flame being of the ascended flares pulsed in deep crimson. Irresponsible is delay. We speak not of pirates or rebels. The transmissions show growth, infestation, annihilation. I say again, containment. Seal the affected systems. Burn any vessel that attempts to cross their borders. Murmurs rippled, some approving, some horrified. The notion of sacrificing entire sectors to isolation was unthinkable to the more idealistic delegates. The multithron chorus buzzed in overlapping tones. Containment is a strategy of desperation. We should dispatch peace envoys. If this force consumes, perhaps it consumes out of need, not malice. To understand motive is to find resolution. Sierra's lips curled faintly. Peace envoys. She imagined a shuttle full of robed diplomats attempting to negotiate with what she had seen, the vast, writhing hive ships, the endless tide of organisms devouring spires and oceans alike. She imagined those envoys, last words drowned in the droning hunger song. The chair raised a limb. Human delegate, you have been recognized. Sierra rose, feeling every eye upon her. This time there was less amusement in their stares, more unease. You have now seen what we warned you of, she began. The Ferran League is gone, not diminished, not threatened, gone. Their cities are black ash, their oceans rotting seas of biomass. Their people are food for the swarm. This is not piracy. This is not rebellion. This is extinction. Her voice echoed in the crystalline dome. Some delegates flinched at the word. Extinction. It was a word most avoided, as though saying it aloud might invite it closer. You speak of containment, Sierra continued, turning toward the flame being. Containment is nothing but starvation delayed. You speak of diplomacy, she said, addressing the insect chorus. You cannot reason with hunger. You cannot plead with fire. You cannot bargain with the abyss. It will take everything you offer and still demand more. Her voice hardened. Mobilize your fleets, not tomorrow, not in deliberation. Now, strike at their breeding worlds, destroy their hive ships before they reach your heart worlds. Anything less is suicide. The hall erupted. Voices clashed in disbelief, anger, scorn. The Qatari delegate rose to its full height, wings spread like a canopy of bronze. There it is again, it thundered. The human reflex, the hammer for every problem, to burn, to kill, to annihilate. You cloak it in the guise of necessity, but we see it for what it is, your nature, always the soldiers, always the butchers. Sierra stood unflinching beneath the storm of voices. She knew her words would be dismissed, but the truth weighed heavier than pride. You will not act, she said evenly. You will watch as the swarm takes system after system, and when the tide reaches your doorstep, you will remember this warning, and you will come to humanity, not because you want to, but because you have no choice. The chair struck the floor with its limbs, silencing the uproar. The council will deliberate. The vote was called hours later, though the result was clear long before. The council agreed to strengthen quarantines, to increase observation, to send emissaries to establish contact with the so-called swarm. Mobilization was rejected. Preemptive strikes were rejected. Humanity's council was rejected. Sierra listened to the verdict with a hollow calm. The decision was written before she spoke. Her words had only widened the divide. When the hall emptied, she lingered. Alone beneath the glimmering ceiling, she whispered again the truth she carried like a curse. They will come crawling. The truth came faster than she expected. Only weeks later, the council received word from the Jandaria Accord. Not a plea for aid, only silence. Their fleets, proud in number and heavy with tradition, had been dispatched to reinforce their colonies along the frontier. None had returned. Their beacon worlds, once brilliant with culture, fell into darkness one by one. Then came the refugees. Shattered vessels staggered across the void, stripped of shields and armor, carrying survivors who spoke only in tremors and sobs. They spoke of skies blotted by endless shapes, of suns dimmed by biomass clouds, of oceans turned to wombs for creatures birthed by the millions. They spoke of entire cities screaming as they were swallowed alive. The council convened once more. This time the hall did not buzz with arrogance. It quivered with fear. The Kartari spoke first, their wings drawn close. Perhaps there is merit in reassessment. The Multithron chorus whispered in tones of unease. The envoys have not returned. Perhaps diplomacy is not viable. The flame being pulsed in searing crimson. I said containment. I said it from the first. Now the rot spreads faster than our walls can rise. You did not listen. The chair's translucent body flickered with uncertainty. For the first time, cracks showed in the council's calm veneer. Then what is to be done? What path remains? Sierra stood, though she had not been recognized. Her voice carried anyway, cutting through the chambers, trembling. You know the path. I have spoken it since the first whisper reached your ears. War, not hesitation, not half measures. War, strike them before they consume the spiral. Strike them before your species are spoken of only in memory. This time, fewer voices rose in scorn, more shifted in uneasy silence. The chair did not dismiss her, not yet, not openly, but neither did it agree. And so the council clung to hesitation, even as the stars themselves began to dim. The fleet of the Jandaria Accord was no token force. It was a wall of steel and fire, a legacy of centuries spent guarding their border colonies against raiders and cosmic storms. Over 300 warships slipped from faster-than-light transit into the unlit skies above Idran 3, a frontier world once rich with crystalline seas and merchant docks. What they found there silenced the bridge crews. The planet no longer gleamed with its ocean light. From orbit, it looked diseased, its surface choked in sprawling masses of blackened growth that pulsed like muscle tissue. The seas boiled in great, heaving waves, alive with swarms of creatures that writhed together in shapes too vast to comprehend. Mountains had collapsed into pits that opened and closed as though breathing. But it was not the planet that froze the fleet. It was the sky. A shadow larger than any ship in their registry drifted between them and the sun, eclipsing light with a grotesque majesty. It was not a vessel in the sense the Jandari understood. It was a hive, a living fortress of carapace and spires, its surface crawling with movement, birthing smaller craft like spores shedding from a fungus. The commander of the fleet, Admiral Thaic Verne, stood at the bridge of the Accord's pride, the dreadnought shield of empires. His voice was gravel, steady even as ore pressed at the lungs of his officers. Transmit wideband challenge, let them hear us. A young officer obeyed. Her voice trembled as she spoke into the void. Unidentified fleet, you are trespassing upon the sovereign systems of the Jandari Accord. Withdraw immediately or you will be fired upon. The words carried into silence. No reply came. Instead, the hive shifted. The droning began, resonating not through comms, but directly into the hulls of their ships, vibrating metal like the pluck of a string. Crew members clutched their ears, though there was no sound in air. It was in bone, in marrow. Then the void bloomed with motion. The smaller spawn, dozens, no, hundreds, of organic craft peeled away from the hive, their forms like sharpened shells bristling with protrusions. They moved with a unity that mocked the Accord's precision. Admiral Verne did not hesitate. All ships, fire. The void lit with lances of energy, rail-shot plasma bursts. The swarm spawn erupted in flashes of torn carapace and vaporized flesh. For a moment, hope surged. For a moment, the fleet believed itself strong. Then the second wave came, and the third, and the fourth. For every swarm vessel destroyed, 5 more emerged from the hive's bleeding paws. They swarmed the Accords formation, darting between firing arcs, latching onto hulls like parasites. They tore through shields not with energy, but with sheer biological persistence, boring through layers of alloy with acidic appendages. On the shield of empires, alarms blared. Reports flooded in. The Spear of Dawn lost with all hands, the Pride of Idran overrun, the rear escort squadrons shredded. Admiral Verne's voice did not waver. Maintain fire, target the hive. If we sever the head, the body falters. The dreadnought's cannons roared, beams of light slamming into the hive. The carapace split, bleeding fluids that crystallized in vacuum. The hive shuddered but did not break. Instead, it opened. A more of impossible scale unfolded, petals of bone and chitin spreading to reveal an inner void teeming with light. For an instant, the fleet thought it was a weakness. Then the maw pulsed. A wave of energy unlike any weapon they had catalogued surged forth. It was not fire, not radiation, but pure destructive resonance. It passed through shielding as though shields did not exist. Ships cracked in half, their cores shattering under vibrations tuned to rip metal apart. In one pulse, a third of the fleet was gone. Screams echoed through the comms. Officers wept openly. The spawn tore through survivors, dragging them toward the hive maw as though feeding. Admiral Verne stared at the ruin, his jaw stone, his hands unshaking. He turned to his first officer. Transmit to the council. Tell them, the resonance struck again. The shield of empires split down its spine, its bridge swallowed in silence. The Jandari Accord's fleet was no more. When the transmission reached the Hall of Convergence, it came broken, jagged, barely held together by the fragments of automated distress signals. Still, what it showed was undeniable. Delegates sat in horrified silence as the images played, ships breaking apart in resonance waves, officers clutching their heads as their vessels dissolved, the hive looming like a world that moved of its own will. The chamber was not the same as it had been. No one laughed. No one scoffed. The multithron chorus whispered in fractured tones, their shared voices out of sync. The Qatari delegates sat hunched, wings drooping. Even the flame being of the ascended flares pulsed in dull, fearful blue. The chair's voice trembled, though it tried to hold formality. The Jandari Accord fleet has been destroyed. Their colonies have ceased transmission. Their borders lie open. No one spoke. Sira rose slowly. The weight of the moment pressed against her chest, but she carried it. Her voice was measured, clear, and merciless. You see it now. The swarm does not negotiate. The swarm does not contain. The swarm annihilates, and it will not stop with the Accord. It will not stop until the stars themselves are silent. You wanted proof. You wanted confirmation. Now you have it, written in the blood of fleets. Her words echoed in the crystal dome. This time, no derision followed. Only silence, thick and suffocating. Then the Qatari spoke, its voice stripped of arrogance, heavy with dread. What do we do? Sira looked around at them, at the mighty delegates who had dismissed humanity for generations. She did not soften her gaze. You fight or you die. Those are the only choices left. The Hall of Convergence had never been so silent. Not in the wake of trade wars, not in the aftermath of uprisings, not even during the cataclysm of the far-reach plague that had burned across 6 sectors a century earlier. Always, the chamber had buzzed with words, sharp and bright, each delegate desperate to dominate the air. Now silence reigned, silence and fear. The shattered transmission from the Jandari Accord fleet hovered above the center of the chamber, replaying on a loop until even the most hardened delegates looked away. Ships breaking apart in waves of impossible resonance. Crews clawing at their skulls as vibrations tore through their vessels. The looming hive, vast as a small moon, birthing endless spawn. The chair of the council had called this emergency session, though its crystalline body flickered with a dull light, as though dimmed by dread. It raised its many limbs, the sound of glass scraping stone carrying through the chamber. Delegates of the council, We have borne witness to the destruction of the Jandari fleet. We must deliberate our course. A ripple of unease swept the chamber. It was the Qatari Dominion who spoke first, their once-proud delegates slumped, wings drooping low. The molten glow of their eyes had dulled. We underestimated the danger, I will not hide it. What we saw was not piracy nor rebellion. It was war unlike any we have prepared for. Our fleets cannot endure such an enemy alone. Murmurs of agreement followed, quiet, reluctant, but there. The multithron chorus chittered, their many mouths speaking unevenly, no longer in perfect unison. Our envoys did not return. Their silence is answer enough. We had hoped to reason. We had hoped hunger might be soothed. But the swarm does not hear. The swarm devours. The flame being of the ascended flares pulsed in deep red streaked with violet, colors of agitation and dread. Containment is no longer viable. The tide grows faster than walls can rise. We burn one system and 3 more fall. We are not containing a fire, we are drowning in it. The chair turned, translucent head tilting toward the lowest ring. Human delegate, you have remained silent until now. Will you speak? All eyes turned to her. Ambassador Sira rose slowly, her robe whispering across the stone floor. She met their stares without hesitation. No longer curious, no longer mocking, their gazes carried fear. I warned you, she said. The words were calm, but the weight behind them pressed against every ear. From the first whisper of this threat, I told you what would come. You dismissed me, you laughed. And now the Jandari accord is ash. The hall stirred, but no one interrupted. This is not the end, Sira continued. It is the beginning. The swarm does not pause. It does not celebrate its victory. Even now it spreads. Even now it devours the stars along your borders. And you sit here debating what to call it, as though naming the abyss could banish it. Her voice sharpened. You ask what must be done. The answer has not changed. War, not hesitation, not containment, war. Strike at their hives before they multiply beyond reckoning. Burn their breeding worlds, shatter their nests, fight or perish. The hall erupted, not with laughter this time, but with panic. Impossible, cried a delegate from the Tenric League, their tendrils coiling in agitation. We have seen their strength. A single hive annihilated an entire fleet. To hurl more ships at them is to offer more flesh, the multithron chorus buzzed. Even should we unite every fleet, we are outnumbered. For every swarm we cut down, more will be birthed. How can one destroy a hunger without end? The Qatari delegate snapped its wings in frustration. And what choice remains? Surrender? Submission? You have seen what they do to worlds. Better to fall in fire than in feeding. The chamber devolved into chaos, voices overlapping in panic, despair, and rage. The chair struck its limbs against the floor over and over until silence returned. The council will not descend into fear, the chair said, though its voice trembled. We will deliberate strategy. We will, strategy. Sira cut in, her voice ringing clear, unshaken. You speak of strategy, yet you ignore the only weapon at your disposal that can match the swarm. The chamber hushed. The chair's crystalline limbs froze mid-gesture. And what weapon is that, Terran? It asked, voice sharp with suspicion. Sira's gaze swept the chamber. Humanity. A ripple of discomfort passed through the delegates as if the very word unsettled them. The flame being pulsed in jagged streaks. You would make this war an excuse to unleash your kind. You dream of proving your bloody worth, of dragging us all into your endless battles. No, Sira said, steady. I dream of survival, and survival requires what you fear most. War as only humans wage it. We do not speak of containment. We do not speak of half measures. We speak of total war. The kind that breaks empires, that scours worlds. The kind you forbid because you fear what it makes of those who wield it. The Qatari delegate's eyes glowed brighter, molten anger, igniting behind its despair. And what if we grant you this war? What if we place our survival in the hands of butchers? Will we survive the swarm only to be ruled by humanity? Sira met its gaze. Better ruled than consumed, better scarred than erased. Silence followed, heavy and bitter. The delegates shifted, wings folding, tendrils coiling, flames dimming. No one spoke. For the first time, the council stared at humanity not with contempt, but with the unspoken acknowledgement of need. The chair's body pulsed faintly. Its voice carried resignation. The council will deliberate further. No decision shall be rushed. A chorus of protests rose, some demanding immediate action, others demanding restraint. But Sierra heard only the hesitation, the weakness, the endless cycle of delay. She bowed stiffly and left the chamber, her footsteps echoing against the ancient stone. Outside, in the quiet of the delegation corridors, her aide hurried to her side, face pale. "Do you think they'll listen this time?" Sierra looked out through the crystalline walls, where stars shimmered cold and indifferent. "They will not listen until they are on their knees," she said, "and by then, the galaxy will already be burning." The Hall of Convergence no longer glowed with the brilliance of captured starlight. Its prisms had been dimmed, the refracted beams muted. It was as though the chamber itself mourned. The council had not convened in regular session. This was an emergency gathering, called in the middle of the cycle, announced with such haste that several delegations arrived disheveled, unprepared. Some seats remained empty, their representatives lost to the chaos unraveling in the outer spiral. The chair of the council stood at the heart of the chamber, its crystalline form dull and cracked along one limb. The cracks had not been there before. The sight alone sent a murmur through the tiers. "Delegates," the chair began, voice trembling like strained glass. "The reports from the Ferran League and the Jandaria Accord are now joined by those from the Veya Collective. Their core worlds have fallen silent. The swarm expands without cease. Refugee vessels flood every corridor of the spiral. Quarantines have failed. Containment has failed. Diplomacy has failed. The council must decide its course, or there will soon be no council left to decide anything." The silence that followed was not respectful. It was heavy, suffocating, the silence of those who had run out of lies to protect themselves. The Kartari Dominion delegate rose slowly. Once, their wings had stretched wide with pride. Now they folded close, dull and heavy. Their voice was low, stripped of its earlier arrogance. "My people can no longer defend our colonies. Our fleets are shattered. Our borders bleed. We demand, not request, demand that this council act with unity, not words, not quarantines, not envoys, war." The multithron chorus buzzed, their voices jagged and discordant, each body nearly speaking over the other. "We have lost entire hives. The swarm feeds upon us, multiplies upon us. We thought reason might sway them, but reason is consumed. Only fire remains." The flame being of the ascended flares pulsed in frantic, jagged light, colors colliding in violent rhythm. We told you from the first breath. Containment cannot hold. Fire cannot hold. Only annihilation, absolute and merciless, can carve survival from this tide." The chamber grew louder, voices layering into chaos. Delegates shouted across the tiers, demanding resources, demanding fleets, demanding sacrifices from neighbors. Some wept openly, some shrieked in fear. The hall, once the seat of order, cracked into bedlam. The chair struck its limbs against the stone over and over until the sound cut through the storm. "Enough," the chamber stilled. The chair's translucent body dimmed further. "You speak of war. And yet who shall fight it? Our fleets lie in ruin, our worlds burn. We have no doctrine for this kind of conflict. We have no history of such annihilation. We have never," it faltered, its voice softening to near silence. "We have never dared." The words hung in the hall like a death sentence. Slowly, deliberately, Ambassador Sierra Kalin rose from the lowest tier. She did not speak at once. She let the silence stretch, let the weight of their failure press upon them. Only when the stillness became unbearable did she speak. "You have dared nothing," she said. Her voice was cold iron, steady and merciless. "You have spent centuries congratulating yourselves for restraint, for civility, for your so-called enlightenment. You built a galaxy upon treaties and prohibitions, upon laws that bind every hand but those of the predators beyond your sight. And now you face an enemy that cares nothing for your laws, nothing for your restraint. And you discover too late that you have forgotten how to fight." The Kartari delegate snapped its wings, a brittle sound. Do not speak to us as though you warned us not once, but 1,000 times. Do not, Sierra cut across them. I did warn you, and you dismissed me. You dismissed all of humanity. You called us butchers, soldiers, primitives. You called us obsessed with war, and you were right. The chamber froze. No delegate moved. Sierra's gaze swept across the tiers, steady and merciless. War is what we are. War is what shaped us. Our history is not of restraint, but of blood. We destroyed ourselves again and again until there was nothing left but those who learned how to endure. Every weapon you banned, we perfected. Every strategy you buried, we practiced. Every horror you swore never to unleash, we kept ready. Her voice dropped to a razor whisper that carried through the hall. And now you beg for survival in a war only we know how to fight. The silence that followed was agony. Some delegates trembled, others lowered their heads. Even the chair seemed smaller beneath her words. Finally, the flame being pulsed in slow, reluctant crimson. Then we must ask. The words hung like poison. The multithron chorus whispered, fractured and broken. If survival requires butchers, then we will kneel before butchers. The Qatari delegate closed its molten eyes. Humanity, we mocked you, we dismissed you, now we beg you, take this war, take it and save us. The chamber erupted, not in protest, but in despairing agreement. Voices clashed, not to deny, but to demand. Pleas filled the hall, once proud civilizations bending their words into prayers. Terrans lead us, Terrans burn them, Terrans save what we cannot. Sierra did not smile. There was no triumph in this moment, only bitterness. She let their desperation wash over her before she answered. You ask humanity to fight your war, she said. Understand what that means. You do not gain fleets. You do not gain allies. You gain a firestorm. We will not fight with your restraint. We will not honor your prohibitions. We will not ask your permission to do what must be done. We will scour until the void itself howls. Her words rang like a verdict. Some delegates wept. Some bowed their heads. Some looked away, ashamed. The chair lowered its limbs, crystal dim with defeat. Then so be it. Humanity, the council grants you command. The war is yours. Sierra bowed her head, not in deference, but in acknowledgement. You will have your war, she said. But when it is done, remember this. Survival came not from your restraint, but from the savagery you despised. And humanity will not forget how long you waited to crawl. The Hall of Convergence, once a place of pride and posturing, had become something else entirely, a chamber of humiliation where the mighty had bent before the species they had scorned. And outside, in the dark between the stars, the swarm fed. The message reached Earth in the form of silence, not triumphant, not pleading, simply authorization. The Council's decree was written in the sterile language of bureaucracy, yet beneath the polished phrasing lay the desperation of civilizations on the brink. It did not grant humanity partnership. It did not grant them respect. It surrendered to them the one thing the Council had sworn never to yield, the right to wage war without restraint. Admiral Kalen received the transmission in a fortified chamber beneath the Atlantic Bastion, a citadel carved into the bedrock of what had once been Lisbon. The walls here were not crystal or marble, but steel layered upon steel, designed to withstand not beauty but annihilation. He read the words once, twice, then closed the slate with deliberate calm. Around him, officers stood in silence, their uniforms dark as the void, their faces hard with expectation. It has begun, Kalen said. The room did not cheer, no applause, no exhalation of relief, only the sharp nods of those who had been waiting for this moment all their lives. Signal to the vaults, Kalen continued. Open them. Across the Sol system, orders moved faster than light. Deep beneath Luna's surface, armored gates opened with a hiss older than memory. The Titan yards, dormant for decades, lit their furnaces once more. On Mars, whole cities shifted, revealing hidden arsenals buried beneath civilian sprawl. Asteroid belts long thought stripped of resources revealed disguised shipyards, their skeleton fleets waiting only for the signal to awaken. The galaxy had thought humanity restrained, tamed by council law. But humanity had not forgotten its history. It had not forgotten the lesson carved into its bones. Prepare for the worst, because the worst always comes. The Terran Defense Network had been humanity's polite name for its arsenal. In truth, it was an empire of steel waiting beneath the skin of a civilization. Thousands of warships, their hulls dark, their weapons forbidden, fleets trained in doctrines outlawed by every other species, technologies discarded by the Council, hidden away by humans who had never trusted peace. Now they stirred. On the orbital shipyard above Europa, Captain Elian paced as the first of the dreadnoughts powered up. The vessel was colossal, a leviathan of layered plating, its silhouette jagged rather than graceful, designed not for beauty but survival. Rows of rail batteries lined its spine. Along its hull, the forbidden glow of antimatter torches flickered to life. "Name?" Elian asked. The yardmaster hesitated only a moment. "We are calling her Ashbringer." The name spread quickly across the command net. No one objected. Other names followed, each vessel christened not in honor of exploration or unity, but in memory of humanity's own scars. Verdun's Ghost, Hiroshima's Reckoning, the Somme Eternal. Each name a wound, each ship a reminder of what humanity had done to itself long before it was asked to fight for others. Doctrine briefings followed. Officers gathered in secure chambers, reviewing strategies that had not been spoken aloud in a century. Total war doctrines, extermination campaigns, scorched void strategies, none of the polite euphemisms the Council preferred. These were plans that began with the assumption that mercy was suicide. General Sato stood before her cadre of commanders, her voice cutting through the air like steel. The swarm is not an enemy to defeat in battle. It is an infestation. You do not duel it. You do not negotiate. You burn it. You salt the ground so it cannot return. If you hesitate, if you falter, if you cling to restraint, it will devour you. Understand this. We do not fight for victory. We fight for survival, and survival demands annihilation. There was no dissent. There never had been. From the hidden academies of Ganymede, shock troops marched. Their armor was not sleek or ceremonial, but thick, brutal, designed to withstand the corrosive bile of swarm spawn. Their weapons were heavy, grotesque by Council standards, flamethrowers, shredders, warheads laced with compounds that burned atmosphere itself. The Council had banned such weapons long ago. Humanity had perfected them. In the depths of the Pacific, submarines rose from trenches where no light had touched in centuries. They breached into daylight, their hulls covered in launch bays for payloads the Council would have outlawed 10 times over. In the asteroid belts, silos opened, revealing warheads whose detonations would rip atmospheres from worlds. The arsenal was awake, and with it came the reckoning. Ambassador Sierra Kalen watched from orbit above Earth as fleets assembled, blotting out the stars. She had argued for this moment in the Hall of Convergence, but even she felt a weight pressing upon her chest as the scale revealed itself. It was one thing to speak of humanity's savagery. It was another to witness it. Her aide whispered beside her. "Do you think the Council knows?" Sierra's gaze remained fixed on the warships, on the banners of black and red unfurling across their hulls. "They know nothing. They begged for survival, but they do not understand the price. Not yet." She turned, her expression unreadable. "But they will." The Council, of course, demanded oversight. Within days of granting command to humanity, envoys arrived to observe, to monitor, to pretend they still had authority. They were greeted not with ceremony, but with silence. Escorted through fortified halls, they glimpsed things no outsider had ever seen. Barracks filled with soldiers drilling in brutal precision, weapons test ranges where the atmosphere itself screamed under fire, databanks filled with war simulations spanning millennia of human bloodshed. One envoy from the Tenric League recoiled at the sight of a warhead being loaded into a carrier. "What is that?" they demanded. The handler did not answer. "It is forbidden by Council law," the envoy protested. "That munition alone violates." The handler turned, eyes cold. "So did begging us for help." The envoy said nothing more. Every env returned to their delegations shaken. Some whispered of betrayal, some whispered of salvation, all whispered of fear. By the second week, the first Terran fleets departed Sol. not exploratory ships, not token detachments, fleets, thousands of vessels, their hulls blackened, their drives burning with forbidden fuel. They moved with purpose, not as guardians, but as executioners. The galaxy had begged humanity for salvation. Now it would witness what salvation meant when forged in human hands. They did not call it a battle. That would have been polite, a word the Council favored when dusting horror with euphemism. Humanity called it an incision, a surgical rip into the swarm's belly intended to stop hemorrhage before the patient bled out altogether. The armadas gathered beyond mapped space like storms massing beyond a horizon. They did not parade, they coalesced. The Ashbringer hung at the heart of the line, its silhouette a block of shadow against starlight. Around it clustered carriers, dreadnoughts, and barges bristling with ordnance. Squadrons of strike corvettes formed tense, coiled vectors, ready to spill outward at the snap of a command. Admiral Kalen stood on the bridge of the flagship, hands behind his back, face carved in the long practice of command. Beside him, General Sato watched tactical overlays sweep the forward arc. Captain Elian's voice threaded through the net from Europa, clipped and patient. Ambassador Sira watched from a command dais, rigged for diplomacy turned wartime necessity. She wore no ceremonial robes. Instead, a matte jacket bore tactical insignia, an emblem that now meant not prestige but survival. Targets had been chosen after nights of consultation, after probes had scavenged what they could from orbit and from the cold medium of captured transmissions. There were the hives, massive, spine-ribbed fortresses the size of moons. There were the birthing worlds, planets where the swarm's life cycle accelerated, where biomass swelled in days rather than centuries. And there were the convenests, clusters of hive spores traveling like migrating storms between sectors. The Council had asked for observation. Humanity offered instruction. They accepted, finally, the ugly hierarchy of need. Humans commanded, Council delegates observed and relayed. There were murmurs about sovereignty and chains of command, bitter acknowledgments of pride swallowed to avoid extinction. The envoys rode as guests aboard human flagships, clipped into seats that offered them no pretense of control. "Remember the doctrine," General Sato said quietly to the bridge. Her voice was not raised, but it carried weight. "This is not attrition, it is precise eradication. We take the breeding world first. We sever the hive networks. We do not give them the chance to adapt. Once we break their reproductive nodes, we hollow them out and burn what remains." "Understood," Admiral Kalen answered. "Deployment vectors Alpha through Delta will strike simultaneously. Corvettes will cut lanes, carriers will deny reinforcements, dreadnoughts cut the nests. Bombardment teams hold in reserve until the breeding nodes are exposed." The human fleet moved like a hand closing. Long-range drives flared, leaving behind pinprick wakes as entire wings folded into sublight. Jump points blinked out as combat squadrons phased into engagement corridors. For the Council observers, watching their first offensive in real time was a study of disbelief and an uncomfortable, dawning hope. The first incision opened over Tarsi's Prime, a world catalogued 2 centuries earlier as a quiet, rain-washed orb at the edge of known space. Sensor sweeps had revealed it pulsing with organic signals the moment humanity's probes brushed its outer magnetosphere. Thermal signatures mapped to subterranean furnaces of life. Satellites picked up the steady rhythm of mass breeding, life churning inward to outward in synchronized surges. "Visual on the outer hive ring," Captain Elian reported. "They're arranged like teeth." "Form up," General Sato ordered. "Strike Squadrons 1 and 2, go dark and burn the approach lanes. Corvettes 3 through 7 lay suppression fields. Dreadnoughts, prepare anti-surge modulation." Suppression fields were not elegant. They were not the displays of shimmering shields the Council's fleets favored in ceremony. These fields were raw, layered interference matrices designed to choke the swarm's resonance, and understanding humans had gleaned from salvaged survivors and from listening to the things they had eaten. The swarm's weapon was not merely physical, it tuned the physics around it. Humans answered with mechanical discord, chaos engineered to deny the enemy the harmonic their resonance required. The first contact was a mosaic of awful precision. Swarm spawn accelerated from the hive's flanks like a stone skittering across water. Their forms birthed flares of acidic discharge, spines stabbing in arcs meant to find seams and weak welds in metal hulls. Corvettes darted like shards, plating themselves with ablative skin and deploying swarms of microprojectiles that chewed at the outer carapaces of the spawn. Admiral Kalen watched tactical feeds as the first wave struck. For a moment, human explosives punched through, and the assault seemed to be going to plan. Spawn tore, disintegrations bloomed, convoys shattered. Then the hive responded. It did not respond with strategy or maneuver, but with biology's obscene arithmetic. For every spawn that died, 2 more cleaved free of the hive's surface. Plagues of larvae erupted, their chemical blooms coalescing into new forms. The swarm's reproduction was a cascade, till the outward shell and inner seeds unfurled. Adjust, General Sato hissed. Conserve fire on the outer wave. Corvettes pull to Vector 3. Carrier wings, execute carrionet sweep delta. Missile arrays, prime gravitic anchors. Gravity weapons had been outlawed for obvious reasons. When deployed without meticulous covenant, they warped whole systems, killed millions in indiscriminate tides. Humans had perfected controlled gravitic imploders that did not rip space itself, but collapsed localized mass into a compression field that would strangulate the organic tissue of the swarm. To the Council, the words were terrifying. To the fighting crews, they were necessary. The first gravity bubble formed like a storm at the edge of the hive. It sucked spawn inward, compacting them into a furnace of pressure. Human incendiaries ignited, wave after wave, within the gravity well. Ships recorded thermal signatures that rose to levels that should have melted alloy. Instead, metal held and the biomass within the bubble burned and coagulated. It was gruesome. It was merciless. It worked. On the bridge, a council env, a being of glass and filaments whose species was known for long lifespans and careful speech, stared at the feeds with a look that passed for nausea in their culture. "Do you understand what you are doing to them?" they murmured. Sira's answer was quiet, almost tender. "Do you understand what they have been doing to your people?" The env had no reply. Inside the hive, things began to shriek in frequencies the ships, sensors translated into raw waveforms. Human munitions drove inward, seeking the nodes that wired the hive's reproductive cycles. Tactical probes punched through chitin and organic conduit, their burrowing charges set on timers. The first nodes detonated in sequence. The hive convulsed. It was not instantaneous. There were moments of arithmetic horror when a field of spores erupted outward into the void, a cloud vast as a planet. That cloud carried seeds and larvae, a storm meant to seed other worlds. Humans had planned for that too, containment nets deployed, antimatter curtains slashed through the cloud's leading edge, vaporizing the innermost masses. The resulting conflagration was monstrous, an incandescent bloom that left the vacuum bright as day for a heartbeat. "You are burning their children," muttered the council envoy. General Sartor's face did not change. "We are burning what would have become your children. We are burning the means by which they would grow and swallow you." There were losses. There were always losses. Corridors of human ships flashed out as resonance waves found seams, as the swarm found strategies on the fly, evolution in the span of hours, adaptations that poisoned missile lanes and rerouted energy fields. Boarding parties sent to pierce the hive's tissues reported horrors, crowded corridors of living ducts, organs pumping spores like glands, larvae writhing in lighted nurseries. Shock troops fought in fusillades of flame and blade, their armor slick with ichor. But the nodes fell. They were heavy, dense conglomerations of reproductive tissue, and when human charges found them they detonated with the force of engineered suns. The hive convulsed and fell silent, its surface breaking like glass falling into shadow. Pools of biofluid congealed in orbit, and the great maw of the hive shrank, losing its ability to birth new spawn at unsustainable rates. "That's one incision," Admiral Kalen said, voice low. "Not a cure, but the bleeding should slow." A transmission came through, raw and trembling. It was from the Council's monitoring array, relayed by the envoys on board. The Jandari sectors lessened aggression. "Some systems have ceased being consumed in the wave patterns. Your strike has, perhaps, altered their spread." Relief, fragile and brittle, crossed the bridge like a current. It was not celebration, not yet. It was a cautious exhale. The human fleet did not linger to bask in it. While the main force held position, strike wings dispersed. Targets were pre-selected across vectors, 2 more hives, 3 breeding worlds, a convanest in transit. The doctrine of incision called for surgical strikes, spaced closely enough to deny the swarm time to regenerate its leadership of nests. It relied on speed, shock, and the cold arithmetic of killing centers of reproduction. The second and third engagements were bloodier. The breeding world of Luxa Prime, a rain world turned placenta, required orbital sterilization, followed by insertion teams to destroy subterranean nurseries. Gravity imploders collapsed cavernous chambers. Atmospheric burners sterilized the upper crust, sending plumes of ash into the void. For every point of success, there were bloomed horrors, mutated spawn that attacked in coordinated swarms, organ bridges that reconnected severed hive fragments. Humans adapted mid-combat, converting artillery tactics on the fly, scrubbing designs from centuries of self-conflict, and reapplying them in the cold calculus of galactic extermination. On Europa, Captain Elian watched drone feeds of a boarding party take a structure that had once been a city. The team sent down a charge marked for artery compression. The result was brutal. The blast collapsed conduits and ruptured gestation sacs. The feed showed larval masses writhing and then stilled. "You are monsters," whispered a council delegate on Elian's comm channel, voice barely audible. Elian's reply was simple, devoid of rhetoric. "We are survivors." The swarm would learn, as life always does. They evolved tactics, built countermeasures, changed their birthing cycles. Human fleets suffered, ships were lost. Admirals and captains gave orders that cost them careers, friendships, family, choices that no spokesperson could eloquently justify. They paid the price of their own readiness in blood, and yet, inch by bloody inch, the tide shifted. Where the swarm had been a fever spreading unchecked, aches of resistance began to appear. Systems once poised on the brink held steady. Evacuations found time to organize. Shelter planets survived because the swarm's reach had been cut. When the strikes concluded, fleets withdrew to rendezvous points. Medics and repair teams worked against impossible rates of loss. Burned hulls floated in assembly lines for triage. The dead were catalogued in the grim ledger that always followed human campaigns. The council envoys listened, watched, and sent their reports back to the Hall of Convergence. The words arrived like hesitant confessions. Humanity had done what the council refused. In the aftermath, Sira found herself standing where she had once stood as a supplicant. This time, she bore no petition. She looked at the embers of the operation and at the envoys clustered like supplicants themselves, and she felt nothing that resembled triumph. Admiral Kalen joined her in silence. Nearby, General Sato catalogued losses with a practiced calm. Captain Elian stared at feeds of a planet that would not know children for centuries. "We bought time," Sira said finally. Her voice was rough as gravel and not celebratory. "We did not cure them. We did not destroy the swarm outright. We made the spiral bleed slower." Admiral Kalen nodded. "The doctrine works under certain constraints. We have to hold this momentum, and we must be ruthless in target selection. The Council will begin calling for cautions again. They will plead for restraint. Do not be fooled. Every second they spend debating is a world lost." Sira's silence held a warning and a promise. For the first time, the Council delegates had seen the face of the war they had been handed. They had watched the incision and felt its ache. They would remember the sight of fleets burning their children, the smell of ozone and charred biomass. They would remember that the salvation they had begged for had come at a price they had once promised never to pay. Outside, the cold black spooled on, indifferent. Inside, human engines flared on for the long road ahead. The first strike had changed something fundamental. It had proven that the human way of war could stem the tide, at least for a while. It had also proved something else, that the galaxy's survival now depended on a species it had long scorned. No one in the command ring pretended the war was won. But as repair crews shored up hulls and med teams numbered wounds, there was a small, brutal consensus. Incision had bought them hours, days, perhaps years. Use them. Do not waste them in debate. General Sato tapped a hollow slate, the next vectors already flashing. We move again at cycle's turn. We do not rest. We strike, and we strike until there is nowhere left for them to breed. Admiral Kalen's reply was a flat line of resolve. Then let them come. Outside, the burned husk of the first hive orbited a blue star, drifting like a reminder. Inside the fleet, the living breathed and mourned. The Council envoys recorded and translated, their reports sending tremors back through halls of glass and flame. Somewhere in the Hall of Convergence, old men and ancient beings would swallow acute lessons over the taste of their shame. The war had begun in earnest. Humanity had taken the blade and used it. The galaxy watched, uneasy and grateful, and no one yet could say whether they would survive the price.